Before we drift into tonight's tale of the lost cities of Ooo, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself standing at the edge of a silent street. The air is still, except for the soft rustle of leaves brushing against the cracked walls of long abandoned buildings. The moon hangs heavy above, silver light spilling across broken glass and jagged windows. These are not the colorful castles of Ooo, nor the cozy homes of candy people. These are the bones of a world long forgotten, the skeleton of a civilization that came before magic, before princesses, before the strange wonders that now fill the land. These are the lost cities. Each crumbling stone and every vine-choked tower whispers of a time when people much like you and me walked these streets. They lived in homes with electric lights instead of enchanted torches. They rode machines powered by fuel, not magic. They spoke of progress and technology and believed their world would last forever. But the Mushroom War changed everything. What was once vibrant and alive became empty and cold, waiting to be overtaken by time, nature, and eventually by magic. Now all that remains are echoes, echoes of laughter spilling from playgrounds that now lie buried beneath creeping moss, echoes of footsteps on cracked sidewalks where weeds push through the cement, stubborn and unyielding. The cities of Ooo, as we see them in the background of Adventure Time, are not just props or scenery. They are the quiet reminders that Ooo was once Earth, and that the world Finn and Jake call home grew out of a history far more familiar and tragic than it first appears. Imagine walking through one of those empty streets. The skyscrapers loom above you, their glass windows shattered, their steel bones bent and rusting. Ivy crawls along the walls like fingers trying to reclaim what was once built. Birds have made nests in the open rafters, and the sound of dripping water echoes endlessly in the hollow spaces. It feels at once peaceful and unsettling, a city both alive and dead, a paradox caught between time. And yet, for all their silence, these places are not truly gone. They hold memories, imprinted into the bricks and stone. You can almost picture the bustling life that once filled them. People rushing to work, children running through the streets, voices calling out across crowded intersections, neon signs glowing against the night sky, buses roaring past, music spilling from open doors. That world is gone, but it left its fingerprints in every ruin scattered across Ooo. Some fans have speculated that these cities belong to the very last generation of humans before the Mushroom War. Perhaps they were destroyed in the initial blasts, left uninhabitable by radiation and chaos. Or maybe for a time, survivors clung to these streets, sheltering underground or in the upper floors of cracked towers, until the world shifted too far for them to hold on. Over time, their descendants might have become the humans, or wandered so far from their origins that the memory of these places faded completely. What fascinates me most is how these ruins exist quietly in the background of so many adventures. Finn and Jake rarely stop to wonder about them. To them, they are just part of the world, like trees or rivers. But to us, watching from outside, they are windows into the lost past. They remind us that every colorful kingdom of Ooo grew from the ashes of a destroyed Earth. If you pause during episodes where the camera pans across the horizon, you'll see it. A broken tower, leaning against another as if the two are holding each other up. A rusted car frame, half buried in the dirt, its wheels long gone. A billboard faded to the point where only shadows of letters remain. Words that once advertised something ordinary now turned into strange relics. These sites linger in the corner of your vision, hinting at a history that is both real and unreachable. The beauty of Adventure Time lies in this quiet layering of history. The show never spells it all out. Instead, it lets us imagine, letting our minds fill in the gaps. Who built these cities? Who was the last person to see their light shining? Did they know their world was ending, or did it come in a sudden, fiery instant? The ruins of Ooo invite us to ask these questions, even if the answers will always remain just out of reach. As we wander deeper into this story, let's think of the cities not just as ruins, but as storytellers. Silent storytellers etched in stone and steel, whispering of the time before. And maybe if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the heartbeat of the world that was. Think of the way light filters through broken windows. At sunset, golden rays slip through cracks in the glass, spreading across empty rooms where no one lives anymore. Dust drifts in the beams, glowing like tiny galaxies caught in motion. A room once filled with chatter and warmth is now filled only with silence, but silence has its own kind of story. The walls themselves seem to remember, even if the people who built them are long gone. In Adventure Time, ruins are rarely placed front and center, but they are always there, quietly reminding us that Ooo is built on layers. A world of magic and candy people is wonderful, yes, but beneath that wonder lies the weight of tragedy. A war that erased an entire way of life. And yet somehow, even in that loss, beauty took root. Flowers grow out of the cracks in the pavement. Trees wind their roots through the steel beams of fallen bridges. Nature has not just reclaimed the ruins, it has painted over them, softened their edges, and given them a second life. It's interesting to imagine how those who lived in these cities might react if they could see them now. Would they be saddened, knowing their world was gone? Or perhaps they would be amazed that their creations, though broken, still stand after 1,000 years. In a strange way, the ruins are both monuments to their failure and to their resilience. They are fragile, yet enduring. They remind us that, even after catastrophe, something always remains. Walking through an overgrown street, you might pass a storefront whose glass is shattered but whose sign is still faintly legible. Maybe it once advertised food or clothing or music. Whatever the case, it now stands as a puzzle, half erased by time, half preserved by accident. Your imagination fills in the missing details. You can almost hear the hum of conversation inside, the faint echo of a song playing over old speakers. And then the wind shifts, and you are back in silence once more. One of the most haunting details in Adventure Time is how casually Finn and Jake move through these landscapes. They see the towers, the ruins, the remnants of humanity, and rarely ask questions. For them, the ruins are simply part of the scenery. But for us, as viewers, that silence creates a sense of mystery. We are left to wonder why no one in Ooo seems curious about the old world. Perhaps it is because they don't see it as old at all. For them, the ruins are as natural as mountains. They are simply part of the land, and the past is not something they feel the need to remember. That difference in perspective is what makes these cities so haunting. We as the audience know they belong to people like us. We recognize the windows, the steel beams, the bridges. Finn and Jake, however, do not. To them, these shapes are abstract, strange stone forests rising into the sky. To them, these are mysteries, not memories. Fan theory suggests that many of the surviving humans, after the Mushroom War, avoided these places entirely. The radiation, The danger and the painful memories might have kept them away. Instead, they fled underground into shelters and bunkers, like the one where Susan Strong's humans eventually lived. The cities, then, would have been left to collapse on their own, untouched by survivors, swallowed by vines and silence. That makes them even more mysterious, like frozen time capsules waiting for someone to notice them. And yet, despite being abandoned, the cities of Ooo are not empty. They are alive in their own strange way. Animals nest in the broken rafters. Magical beings wander the streets. Ghosts, perhaps, linger in the corners. The ruins might even shape the magic that grew out of the war. Perhaps the strange, chaotic energy of the mushroom bomb seeped into the stones and soil, leaving behind places that hum with unseen power, places where the boundary between the old world and the magical one is thinner than it should be. That is what makes the ruins so compelling. They are not just relics of destruction. They are the fertile soil from which Oo's wonder grew. Without the loss of those cities, there would be no Candy Kingdom, no wizard towers, no enchanted forests. Everything new was built from the ashes of what came before. And in that way, the cities are both tragic and beautiful. They remind us that even endings can give birth to beginnings. Imagine standing at the top of a crumbling skyscraper, looking out across Ooo. Below, the land is alive with color, forests, rivers, mountains glowing under the moon. In the distance, you might see the towers of the Candy Kingdom, shining with warmth. You might see the Ice Kingdom, glittering like a frozen crown. And then, right beneath your feet, you see the empty ruins of the old world. It's as if two realities overlap. The lost and the found, the past and the present, all sharing the same space. That is the essence of the lost cities. They are bridges across time, connecting what once was to what now is. And though no one in Ooo stops to listen, we as wanderers in these stories can pause and imagine the lives that once filled these hollow places. When you look closely at Adventure Time, the ruins are never the main character of the scene, yet they are always present, watching quietly in the background. Think of the very first episodes where Finn and Jake travel across the land. Behind them, rising above the rolling green hills, you'll notice the jagged shapes of skyscrapers. Their tops are broken, their glass long since shattered, their surfaces coated in ivy. The show never stops to explain them, but your mind lingers on the image. It feels like a dream where something familiar appears out of place, where your subconscious recognizes it, even if no one speaks of it aloud. One of the most striking examples is the ruined subway tunnels. In the episode where Finn and Jake meet the humans, we see glimpses of an underground world. The old concrete passages stretch endlessly, their walls cracked and dripping with water, their surfaces decorated with graffiti that may have been scratched in centuries before. There are faint remnants of what once was, rails buried beneath dirt, warning signs half faded, doors that lead to nowhere. These tunnels, though brief on screen, tell a story of people fleeing underground, perhaps hoping the war would pass over them. It did not. Instead, generations later, the humans live here, having transformed these tunnels into their strange new home. What was once a system of transportation became a world of survival. It's fascinating to imagine how many other survivors might have done the same. Every ruined subway station, every underground chamber could have been a shelter for frightened families. Some may have perished. Others may have evolved into the strange, mutated beings that wander Ooo. The ruins are not just empty shells. They may be the birthplace of entire communities that grew out of desperation and adaptation. Above ground, the skyscrapers of Ooo stand like broken teeth, jutting into the sky. Some lean at impossible angles, their steel frames exposed like the ribs of a colossal creature. Others are toppled entirely, lying across rivers or forests, their concrete bones now covered in moss and flowers. There are moments when Finn and Jake stand at the edge of a cliff, and in the distance the skyline of a ruined city stretches across the horizon. You can almost imagine what it once looked like. Windows glowing with electric lights, streets filled with noise and energy. Now those same towers are silent, hollow, and strangely beautiful. One fan theory suggests that some of these towers may have been laboratories or military facilities tied to the Mushroom War itself. Perhaps some still hold secrets buried deep inside. Dangerous weapons, forgotten experiments, or treasures from the old world waiting to be uncovered. In fact, it wouldn't be surprising if magical artifacts later found in Ooo had their roots in these ruins. After all, when technology and chaos collided during the war, the boundaries between science and magic blurred. Who is to say that the crown itself or other relics of great power didn't once sit hidden in a vault beneath a skyscraper? And then there are the neighborhoods. We often see little glimpses of overgrown suburbs where small houses had half collapsed, their wooden frames sagging under the weight of vines. Mailboxes still stand crooked near the road, their paint chipped and their numbers faded. A child's toy, long broken, lies forgotten in the grass. Rusted cars are scattered here and there, their wheels sunk into the earth, their doors hanging open as if the passengers left in a hurry and never returned. These quiet scenes are some of the most haunting. They remind us that the Mushroom War was not just an event of soldiers and bombs. It was an event that touched families, homes, ordinary people who likely never understood what was coming until it was too late. What makes these ruins so effective in Adventure Time is their subtlety. The show does not linger on them with heavy exposition. It trusts us to notice them, to let our imaginations fill in the details. That is what makes them so engaging for a late-night thought. Each ruin is like a puzzle piece, hinting at a larger picture that we may never fully see. And yet, in those hints, the weight of history feels more powerful than if the show had explained it outright. Imagine walking down a quiet street in Ooo, one that Finn and Jake might pass through on an ordinary adventure. The road is cracked, weeds sprouting through every gap. To your left, a building has collapsed inward, its roof caved in, its walls split open to reveal empty rooms. You step closer and see wallpaper still clinging faintly to the inside, patterns of flowers now faded and peeling. On the ground, a metal bed frame lies rusting, surrounded by shards of glass. The space feels strangely intimate, as though you are intruding on someone's forgotten bedroom. Then you step back, and the forest looms in again, reclaiming the space, swallowing it into Oo's ever-expanding wilderness. The mixture of intimacy and enormity is what defines the lost cities. They are both personal and cosmic. They hold the weight of individual lives and the collapse of an entire civilization. Every ruin is both a household story and a planetary tragedy, and all of it now lies under the care of time and magic, slowly transforming into something unrecognizable but strangely alive. The presence of ruins also adds depth to the world of Ooo itself. Without them, Ooo might feel like a purely fantastical land, untethered to our reality. But with them, the show constantly reminds us that Ooo was once Earth, that this magical land grew out of something painfully familiar. The ruins act like bridges across time, making the world feel both fantastical and grounded. It is this tension between the ordinary and the extraordinary, the human and the magical, that gives Adventure Time its haunting atmosphere. The next time you see a ruined tower in the background of an episode, imagine the last day it stood whole. Picture the people inside, unaware that their world was about to end. Imagine their routines, their voices, their plans for the future. And then imagine the silence that followed, the centuries of emptiness, until one day, a boy and his dog wandered past without giving it a second thought. That is the beauty of the lost cities of Ooo. They are not gone. They are still here, whispering, waiting, woven into the fabric of a world that barely remembers them. There is something almost dreamlike about the way the ruins linger in Ooo. They are both too familiar and too strange, as if pulled from the edges of memory. Perhaps that is why they fit so naturally into bedtime stories. They remind us of the quiet hours, when the world outside feels still, when shadows stretch long across the floor, and our minds wander into places half remembered and half imagined. If you listen closely, the ruins of Ooo almost hum with the presence. Not a sound exactly, but a weight, like the echo of voices long gone. Some fans imagine that spirits of the old world might still wander there, not ghosts in the usual sense, but impressions left behind the last moments of laughter, the final footsteps on a stairwell, the simple hum of a machine shutting down. These echoes could be what Finn and Jake sense from time to time, even if they never put words to it. It is also possible that the ruins themselves shaped the new beings who rose after the Mushroom War. Think of the way the humans adapted underground, or how other creatures might have crawled into the light from broken laboratories or cracked shelters. Ooo is filled with beings that defy easy explanation. Where did they all come from? Many of them, perhaps, are children of the ruins. Mutations born from the collapse, lives stitched together by desperation, and strange energies released during the war. The ruins may be more than silent stone, they may be wombs of transformation. There's a subtle poetry in how nature reclaims what humans built. Bridges become cliffs for vines to cling to. Skyscrapers become homes for nesting birds. Highways crack and split, their surfaces softened by grass and wildflowers. What was once artificial becomes part of the natural world again. Adventure Time seems to suggest that the world is always healing, always moving forward no matter how deep the scars. The ruins do not vanish, but they stop being wounds. They become part of a new story. At the same time, there's a bittersweet feeling when you think about how little the people of Ooo know about these places. Finn himself is human, one of the very last, and yet he never dwells on the cities of the past. Perhaps that is because the past is too heavy, or perhaps it is because his story belongs to the present. Still, for us, the viewers, there's a quiet ache in knowing that he walks among the bones of his ancestors without realizing it. Every cracked wall he passes, every shadow of a tower he sees, is part of the history of his people. He is their echo, even if he never calls himself by their name. The ruins also act as reminders of fragility. Even the mightiest structures can fall. Even the brightest lights can go dark. But in that fragility lies a lesson. Life goes on. Ooo is proof of that. What followed the collapse of human civilization was not only chaos, but also beauty. Candy people, talking animals, magical forests, cosmic adventures. All of these exist because the old world ended. The ruins stand not just for what was lost, but for what was gained. They are the threshold between endings and beginnings. Some fans like to imagine specific stories tied to certain ruins. that a half-buried car once belonged to a parent fleeing with their child, that a toppled tower was once a hospital where the last doctors struggled to save lives, that a subway tunnel became a sanctuary filled with candles and whispered prayers long before it became Susan Strong's home. These imagined histories make the ruins even more powerful, because they remind us that behind every broken object was a human hand, a human life. Adventure Time does not tell these stories outright, but it leaves enough space for us to wonder, and in that wondering, the ruins become alive again. Picture yourself standing at dusk in an empty street of Ooo. The sky above glows in soft purples and blues, and the wind brushes gently through the vines. To your right, an apartment building leans slightly, its windows hollow, its doorways dark. To your left, a tree has burst through the roof of an old shop, its branches spreading high into the night air. You stand in the middle, between stone and leaf, between what was built and what now grows, and in that quiet, you feel both sorrow and peace. The sorrow of what was lost, the peace of what remains. That is the essence of the lost cities. They are not only ruins. They are reminders, teachers, storytellers. They whisper of human ambition, of sudden destruction, of nature's quiet patience, and of magic's mysterious rebirth. They remind us that every world, no matter how strange or fantastical, carries the weight of history. Ooo is not just a land of candy and color. It is a land of memory, of layers, of shadows beneath the light. As we close this first step of our journey, let us carry with us the awareness that every corner of Ooo has a story deeper than what we see. A broken tower is more than just scenery. It is a monument. A subway tunnel is more than a setting. It is a record of survival. And a quiet neighborhood swallowed by vines is not empty at all. It is filled with the voices of those who once called it home, voices we can almost hear if we let ourselves listen. The echoes of a forgotten world are all around us in Ooo. They hum in the stone, in the shadows, in the quiet spaces between adventures. And in listening to them, we honor both the past that ended and the future that grew from its ashes. Close your eyes and imagine descending a cracked stairwell. The air grows cooler as you step lower, the sound of the surface fading until only the faint dripping of water greets your ears. The walls are concrete, stained with age, the paint peeling away in long strips. A rusted handrail guides your way, though it feels fragile beneath your touch. At the bottom, you step into the remains of a subway station. The tiled walls are broken, some pieces still clinging while others have fallen to the floor. The ceiling above is cracked, roots dangling down like curious fingers reaching for the ground. This was once a place filled with sound. Footsteps hurrying to trains, voices calling to each other, the hum of machines moving back and forth. Now it is silent, except for the occasional scurrying of a rat or the faint drip of water echoing across the cavern. You can almost hear the ghosts of the past if you listen closely enough. Perhaps the sound of a train rushing by, the vibration rumbling through the earth. Perhaps the faint announcement of a departure, a voice that has not been heard for centuries. The subways of Ooo are glimpsed only briefly in Adventure Time, but their presence is unforgettable. In the episode where Finn and Jake meet Susan Strong and the humans, we see a society that has made its home in these underground spaces. To them, the tunnels are not ruins. They are home. They are safety. They are the only world they know. Their glowing lamps cast soft light across the concrete walls, and their lives unfold within the shadows of the old Earth's bones. It is a fascinating transformation. What was once a transit system became a sanctuary. The very spaces that people of the old world rushed through without thinking became, after the war, the only refuge for survivors. Imagine families stumbling into the subways as bombs fell above, clutching their children, hoping the underground walls would protect them. For some, those walls became tombs. For others, they became shelter, where generations would live and forget what the world above once looked like. The humans are proof of this. Their culture, their myths, their very identity grew from their underground existence. They wear strange helmets, as if clinging to the fragments of a past they do not understand. They speak of the surface with caution, unsure if it is friend or foe. To them, the subway is not a ruin at all, but a city of its own, a world carved from the remnants of another. But beyond the humans, one must wonder how many other creatures might have found their way into these tunnels. The deep places of Ooo are filled with mysteries. Who knows what else may have slumbered there, drawn to the stillness and safety of the underground. Perhaps entire species began in the dark, adapting to life without sunlight, living off what scraps they could find. Perhaps the magic of the mushroom war seeped down through the cracks and transformed those who dwelled below. The tunnels may not just be echoes of the past. They may be cradles of strange new futures. And yet, for all their mystery, there is also something deeply human about these spaces. A subway station is a place built for connection. It was designed so that people could move, meet, and cross paths. Even in their ruined state, you can sense that purpose lingering. The benches are still there, rusted and cracked. The signs, though faded, still mark the exits and directions. Every piece tells you this was once a place of gathering, a place where lives intersected for the briefest of moments. Now those lives are gone, but the structure remains like a memory carved into stone. The air of the subway tunnels in Ooo must feel thick, filled with the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. Every step echoes loudly, reminding you how empty the space truly is. And yet, if you close your eyes, you can imagine the rhythm of trains, the hum of lights, the shuffle of hundreds of people moving at once. That contrast between emptiness and imagined life is what makes the subways such powerful symbols. They are silent, but in their silence, they remind us of the noise that once filled them. Imagine stepping into one of these forgotten tunnels. The first thing you'd notice is the smell, that deep, earthy dampness that comes from stone and metal left to soak in silence for centuries. Water drips from cracked ceilings, echoing in the long darkness like a steady heartbeat. Moss and glowing fungi cling to walls, feeding on whatever nutrients they can pull from the ancient concrete. The deeper you walk, the more you feel the sense of time pressing in, as though the world above is holding its breath while you move through its forgotten vein. In the time before the war, the subway would have been alive with people. Crowds rushing to trains, chatter spilling into the tunnels, the occasional busker playing a tune to fill the air. Those sounds are gone now, replaced by the whisper of your own footsteps and the occasional squeak of something small scurrying into the shadows. But if you listen closely, you might almost hear echoes of the old world, as though the walls themselves remember. One of the most haunting details shown in Adventure Time's scattered glimpses of the subway ruins is how the structure remains mostly intact. Rusted rails still snake through the dark, their purpose long forgotten by the creatures of Ooo who now pass them by without a second thought. The tiled walls, cracked and discolored, still show faint traces of advertisements. Maybe once they promised shiny new gadgets, concerts, or even military recruitment posters before the war took its final toll. Now they're just ghostly reminders of a humanity that no longer rules these lands. There are theories among fans that the subways were not just transportation hubs, but also shelters during the Great Mushroom War. The tunnels, after all, were deep, reinforced, and connected across entire cities. People might have fled into them as bombs fell above, desperate for safety. Some imagine whole underground communities forming in those first terrifying months, huddled together by flickering lights, rationing canned food, trying to rebuild some version of society beneath the rubble. Over time, those who couldn't make it back to the surface might have left traces, scratched messages on walls, hidden caches of supplies, or improvised living spaces now lost in the dark. Others believe that the subways became laboratories for strange experiments, or even prisons where the remnants of humanity tried to control chaos in the aftermath. It's a chilling thought that beneath the playful world of candy kingdoms and magical forests lies an underbelly of hidden human tragedy, sealed away and forgotten. The overgrowth that creeps through these tunnels also speaks to nature's patience. Roots wind their way through cracks, breaking apart cement and twisting around rail lines. Some fans suggest that the glowing plants we occasionally see in Oo's underground scenes may have evolved from experiments with bioluminescence, or perhaps radiation from the war itself twisted ordinary plants into these strange, luminous things. It gives the tunnels an eerie beauty, like walking through a place where both decay and rebirth exist at the same time. Imagine standing on an abandoned platform. The signs above your head are rusted, letters faded until only fragments remain. A half-broken bench still waits, though no tired commuter will ever sit on it again. The rails stretch away into darkness, their vanishing point hidden. It almost feels as though a train could come at any moment, rushing past in a flash of light, carrying passengers who belong to another age entirely. The thought is both unsettling and strangely comforting, the idea that the echoes of the old world might still ride the rails, invisible and eternal. Another fascinating layer of these subways is their role as pathways for the creatures of Ooo. In a world reshaped by magic and mutation, tunnels like these become natural highways. Perhaps goblins, small beasts, or even creatures like the worms we sometimes see in the show travel through them. Some theorize that these underground routes might even connect entire regions of Ooo, explaining how certain beings appear in unexpected places. A child might stumble across one of these tunnels chasing a glow bug, only to wander into realms far away from home. The artistry of these forgotten subways also lingers. The humans who built them often decorated stations with mosaics, murals, and tiled designs. Even in Adventure Time's glimpses, you get the sense of detail patterns half covered by mold. Bright colors faded, but not entirely gone. It's as if the tunnels still want to tell their story, even when no one is left to listen. Imagine walking a little deeper now, past the broken turnstiles and into the tunnels themselves. The walls are lined with old tiles, most of them cracked or missing, and here and there vines have curled through the gaps. They hang like curtains of green, filtering the dim light, and making the place feel like a strange underground garden. The air is heavy, almost still, and you can hear the occasional drip of water echoing endlessly down the tracks. These sounds carry far, making the tunnels feel like living chambers that breathe and sigh long after their intended purpose ended. The deeper you go, the more you sense how important these places once were. Subways are arteries of a city, after all, veins that carried people beneath the surface when the streets above became too crowded. Imagine workers rushing to their jobs, students clutching books or bags, families waiting for the train together. Each train that rattled through carried countless stories, countless memories, all layered into the stone and steel. But when the Mushroom War erupted, All of it came to a sudden halt. The train stopped, the people fled, and the tunnels were left to the silence. In Adventure Time, we only catch fleeting glimpses of these underground places. Sometimes they appear as eerie ruins, sometimes as backdrops to small adventures, but they always whisper of a much larger history. They remind us that beneath the magical surface of Ooo lies the buried skeleton of the old world. And the subways are one of the clearest reminders of just how advanced it once was. They stand as a quiet testament to technology, to ambition, and to the countless lives that once depended on them. As the centuries passed, the tunnels did not simply remain still, they transformed. Plants spread their roots into cracks, mushrooms sprouted from the damp, and strange creatures began to call the darkness home. You might imagine glowing insects buzzing faintly above the tracks, or skeletal animals nesting in the alcoves where commuters once sat waiting for their trains. With no humans left to keep the stations clean and orderly, nature crept in without hesitation. The underground became a kind of parallel forest, one hidden beneath stone and concrete instead of open sky. Think about the trains themselves, too. Abandoned cars might still sit on the rails, their doors rusted shut, their windows clouded with grime. Inside, rows of seats would stand empty, perhaps with old advertisements still peeling on the walls, a soda can forgotten on the floor, a child's toy tucked into a corner. These small, ordinary objects take on an almost sacred quality in ruins like this. They are tokens of the old world, preserved not by design but by accident, waiting for curious eyes to stumble upon them centuries later. The tunnels also invite darker possibilities. In fan theories, some suggest that the subways may have served as shelters during the war. As bombs fell and chaos spread above, families might have crowded into the underground, hoping the thick stone and earth would keep them safe. Some may have survived for days, even weeks, rationing what food they had and listening to the distant rumble of destruction overhead. Others, perhaps, never emerged again. Their voices might still linger faintly in the stone, giving rise to the idea of echoes or ghostly presences. The empty tunnels might not just feel lonely because they are empty, but because they once held so many desperate souls. This notion adds a certain weight to every step. When you picture yourself walking through these places in Ooo, you might feel as though you are walking in the footprints of the lost. Every drip of water, every flicker of shadow could remind you of what was sacrificed, of the fragility of life when the old world came crashing down. And yet there is a strange comfort, too. The ruins endure. Though the people are gone, the spaces they carved remain, filled now with plants, creatures, and imagination. In some parts of the tunnels, Adventure Time shows us makeshift uses. A subway platform might serve as a secret lair, a hideout, or even a strange meeting ground for characters passing through. These details hint at the adaptability of Oo's inhabitants. Even after magic and chaos reshaped the land, the bones of the old world were not forgotten. Instead, they became tools, resources, or simply places of curiosity to be explored. The subways, in their half-forgotten state, act almost like treasure chests. They hold within them not just relics of the past, but opportunities for new stories to unfold. What's particularly haunting about these underground ruins is how familiar they feel to us. We can picture a subway easily because they still exist in our world. We know the rumble of trains, the flicker of fluorescent lights, the sound of footsteps rushing across tile. That familiarity makes the ruined versions in Ooo all the more striking. They feel like echoes of our own cities, showing us what might happen if everything we know one day slipped away. The uncanny blend of recognition and decay makes the subways some of the most poignant ruins in the series. When you let yourself dwell on it, you realize the tunnels are not just reminders of the past, but also mirrors. They ask us to consider how much of our own world might vanish if disaster struck. Would our stations, too, one day become silent gardens of moss and water? Would explorers in some distant age step into our abandoned trains and wonder about the people who once sat there, hurrying to places that no longer exist? And so the subways of Ooo invite both reflection and wonder. They are quiet spaces filled with memory, loss, and transformation, standing as some of the most intimate relics of the fallen earth. Walking through them in your imagination is like walking through the dream of a world that was, one that still lingers in stone, waiting for someone to listen. If you pause for a moment and imagine the voices that once echoed through these tunnels, it paints such a vivid picture. The hurried footsteps of commuters rushing to catch the next train. The soft murmur of conversations between strangers pressed together on long benches. The hiss of brakes as subway cars slid into stations. All of it was a hum, a living rhythm beneath the earth. Now those same platforms echo with only drips of water, the shuffle of small creatures nesting in shadows, and the occasional rustle of roots finding their way through cracks in the walls. What was once a place of constant movement is now a still monument to time's patience. And yet in Ooo, the stillness is never truly empty. Many of the underground dwellings we see have been repurposed by strange beings. Gnomes, gremlins, and all manner of quirky characters find these forgotten spaces comforting. Some might even see them as homes. The subways became less about transportation and more about shelter, community, and secrecy. To live in the subways of Ooo means living between worlds. You are not fully above in the kingdom of light and sky, nor fully below in the deeper caverns where monsters slumber. You are in that middle realm where humans once made their passage, and where echoes of both past and present meet. Think of the graffiti that may still cling to the tiles. Old human writing layered with new markings, strange symbols drawn by Oo's creatures. Some of them may be sigils of protection, scrawled hastily by those dabbling in magic. Others might just be doodles of candy people with smiling faces. But between them, a story emerges, one that layers over centuries. It is a silent conversation between those who came before and those who remain now. And if you look closely enough, you can almost feel that shared breath across time. Even the tunnels themselves may hold stories far stranger than their surface appearance. Perhaps some of them connect in ways the humans never realized. Underground networks sometimes stretch far beyond their mapped routes. In Ooo, where reality itself has grown flexible and magic has seeped into every crack, these tunnels might twist unexpectedly, opening into chambers that never existed before. One step down, a familiar staircase could lead to a forgotten room filled with glowing fungi. Another might bring you face to face with a giant mole king who claims dominion over the earth beneath Ooo. And then, of course, there are the legends of haunted trains. In whispers and campfire tales, some speak of ghostly subway cars that still rumble through the tunnels late at night. No one has ever proven they exist, but a few swear they've heard the faint vibration of wheels on rails, followed by the flash of headlights piercing the dark. If you were brave enough to step aboard, would it take you back in time, carrying you to a day before the Mushroom War, or would it deliver you to some strange corner of Ooo, a place forgotten by all else? The truth may forever remain part of the mystery. Walking further into these tunnels, you might feel the temperature shift. The air grows cooler, denser. Every sound seems to carry further, bouncing between the curved walls. A single drip of water can sound like a drumbeat. And in that hush, you might wonder how much of the human world still lingers, even if unseen. Maybe there are caches of old supplies tucked behind rusted doors, waiting to be discovered. Maybe someone who survived the war once carved their final words into the stone, hoping that someday someone would read them. That hope might still rest there, etched in silence. In Adventure Time, we sometimes see glimpses of these ruins. A collapsed stairwell here, an overgrown tunnel there. They are rarely the focus of a scene, but their presence whispers volumes. They remind us that Ooo is built upon layers and that beneath the cheerful surface of kingdoms and quirky adventures there runs a vast labyrinth of human history. Every time a character brushes past those ruins, they are brushing against an echo of their own forgotten ancestors. And perhaps that is the greatest power of the subways. Not their rails or their stations, not even their hidden chambers or their legends of ghostly trains, but the way they remind us that no matter how much time passes, no matter how strange and magical the world becomes, the traces of those who came before remain, not gone, not erased, but transformed into something new, something that whispers to us in the quiet moments when we pause and listen. The subways of Ooo are not just tunnels. They are memories carved in stone and shadow, patiently waiting for someone to notice them again. Hey there, sleepyheads. If you've been with me on this journey through the lost cities of Ooo, you've already walked with me through the empty streets and descended into the quiet tunnels of the old subway lines. Now I'd like to invite you to tilt your gaze upward. Tonight we lift our eyes toward the broken teeth of the skyline, the skyscrapers of Ooo. These towers rise out of the landscape like ancient monuments, half buried and half forgotten, their glass long shattered, their steel bones bending under the weight of centuries. They are the tallest reminders of a world that once believed in reaching higher, building bigger, and leaving its mark against the sky. Some still stand proud, their silhouettes jagged against the horizon at sunset, while others lean dangerously, their frames buckling under vines and moss that have slowly claimed them. When you wander through Ooo, you sometimes catch glimpses of these skyscrapers from afar. Maybe you're in the Candy Kingdom, where the colorful architecture makes them look even more out of place in the background, like ghosts of a lost civilization still watching over the present. Or maybe you stumble across them deep in the wilds, their bases swallowed by thick forests, their upper floors completely inaccessible, except perhaps to flying creatures or magical beings. They loom like great mysteries, half inviting, half warning you away. What fascinates me about these towers is the silence inside them. Picture walking into the lobby of one of these ruined giants. The floor is cracked marble, littered with broken ceiling tiles and rusted support beams. The front desk, once polished and busy with human workers, is nothing more than a collapsed slab of wood or metal covered in dust. The elevators gape open like empty mouths, their cables long since snapped, the shafts going down into blackness. And if you shine a light upward, you can see the twisted remains of what used to be wires and pipes, swaying slightly as if the building itself still breathes. Every floor tells a different story. The lower levels might be filled with stagnant pools of water, where the rain seeps through broken windows. Old office spaces lie scattered with overturned desks, brittle papers that crumble to the touch, and forgotten mugs still resting where someone might have once left them before the bombs fell. Higher up you might find entire apartments, still furnished but frozen in time. Chairs sit facing blank televisions. Closets hold faded clothes that have lost their color. Children's toys lie abandoned under beds, and then there are the rooftops, where plants have created hanging gardens in what was once concrete wasteland. Entire ecosystems thrive up there, with birds nesting in cracked vents and ivy pouring down the sides like waterfalls. The skyscrapers carry an air of both tragedy and triumph. On one hand, they are scars of a civilization that was wiped away by its own hubris. On the other, they still endure despite centuries of neglect. The fact that so many still stand after the Mushroom War suggests just how much effort humanity put into building them. These were not fragile things. They were monuments to human ambition. And though the humans are gone, their ambitions continue to cast shadows over Ooo. It's easy to imagine what these towers looked like when they were alive with people. Imagine the glow of their windows at night, a whole city glittering like stars trapped on Earth. The sound of bustling streets below, traffic honking, footsteps on sidewalks, voices rising and falling as people moved through their daily lives. Now all that sound has been swallowed, replaced by the whistle of the wind through broken glass. Some fans have speculated that certain towers in Ooo belong to important figures of the old world. There's a theory that one tall building near the Ice Kingdom was once a corporate headquarters, perhaps even linked to early weapons research that led to the war. Others suggest that the skyscrapers were the living spaces of the last wealthy elites, who tried to escape the chaos by building upward, thinking the higher they went, the safer they'd be. And yet, despite all the destruction, there's something strangely comforting about these ruins. They're not just reminders of what was lost, they're also sanctuaries of memory. Each building holds stories we'll never fully uncover, but we can still feel their presence, like echoes in the walls. Now imagine wandering through the silent heart of one of these towers. The air is cooler inside, thick with the smell of stone and metal left to corrode in peace. Your footsteps echo against cracked marble floors that once welcomed people in hurried waves each morning. In one corner, the remains of a revolving door still cling to its frame, half shattered but stubbornly standing, like a ghostly doorman refusing to abandon his post. These little fragments make you pause and wonder about the lives that once flowed through this building like blood through veins. Did someone grab a morning coffee at a lobby cafe before rushing into an elevator? Did a worker glance out of these very windows and daydream about a brighter future? Climbing higher, we might picture an office floor, desks coated in moss, filing cabinets rusted into silence, glass walls shattered, leaving jagged teeth where panes once gleamed. Nature has crept in as the only occupant, vines climbing cubicle walls, roots breaking up carpet tiles. To us, this is hauntingly beautiful. But to the people of Ooo, skyscrapers may feel alien. Their worlds are kingdoms of candy, trees, slime, or fire. These towers are reminders of a society that does not exist anymore, of a time when humanity built upward to conquer the sky. It makes the skyscrapers not just ruins, but relics of ambition, symbols of a dream too heavy for the earth to bear forever. Sometimes we see hints in Adventure Time that characters sense this weight. In episodes where Finn or Jake stumble into a high-rise ruin, their reactions are not just curiosity, but almost reverence. Finn, though young and raised in a magical world, seems to intuit that these places once meant something profound. Perhaps part of him recognizes the human hand behind the walls, the same human blood that runs through him. Standing in the ruins, he's not only an adventurer, but a descendant, gazing at the graveyards of his ancestors' creations. From a lore perspective, skyscrapers also serve as a bridge between the old world and the new. They show us just how sudden the transformation must have been. For a building to stand tall even after the war, and the rise of magic suggests that the transition from technology to arcane energy did not erase everything overnight. Instead, it layered itself on top of what already existed. The people of Ooo may not build skyscrapers anymore, but they live around them, perhaps even within them, reshaping the bones of the old world into something functional for their magical age. Think about Marceline, who has been alive since before the Mushroom War. She likely remembers these towers when they were alive, pulsing with electricity, filled with voices. How strange it must be for her to now drift through them as hollow shells. To her, every broken window and collapsed ceiling would not just be ruin, but memory. She is a witness to the skyscraper's transformation from symbols of human strength to monuments of loss. And yet her presence in these spaces also proves that life adapts. Even ruins can become stages for new stories, for songs played on bass guitars that echo against hollow walls. What fascinates many fans is how the skyscrapers in Ooo remain standing despite the devastation. It invites us to imagine what materials or technologies humans once had, or perhaps what protective enchantments were unconsciously born in the chaos of the war. Did the blast waves simply miss them, or were they so firmly anchored that nothing could topple them? There's even a theory that some towers might have been partially shielded by the rise of magic itself, caught in a liminal space where destruction and preservation balanced each other. The skyscrapers we see today could be the survivors of that strange cosmic tug-of-war. Standing before them, you get a feeling of both awe and sorrow. These towers are like giants who once stood proud, but have now bowed their heads in silence. Each crack, each vine, each nest of birds on their ledges tells a story not of collapse, but of transformation. They are no longer offices, or apartments, or commercial hubs. They are forests in the sky, new ecosystems rooted in the steel skeletons of yesterday. Now picture this. You are climbing one of these ruined towers, step by step, up crumbling staircases where whole sections of wall have fallen away. The steps creak and shift under your weight, and sometimes there are gaps where you have to carefully stretch across, balancing on a slab of concrete that is only barely still in place. Wind whistles through the empty stairwell, carrying faint traces of dust and echoes of voices that are no longer there. When you finally reach a higher floor, the view opens up into a broad office space, stripped bare. The furniture is gone, either destroyed by time or scavenged by survivors. What remains are the faint outlines of where desks used to sit, discolored rectangles on the floor where sunlight once fell through blinds that no longer exist. The silence here is so complete it almost has weight. These offices tell stories even without objects. A broken coffee mug lying in the corner might have once belonged to someone who worked late, tapping away at a keyboard, dreaming of weekends and rest. A cracked whiteboard with faint scrawls of numbers might have been part of a business meeting, some plan meant to change the world, never knowing the world itself was about to change in a way no one could have predicted. Even the elevators, now little more than empty shafts filled with debris, once carried thousands of people daily. Perhaps some were trapped when the power failed, their final moments sealed away in the dark. Adventure Time often leaves these details to the imagination, but that makes them even more powerful. What's interesting is how many skyscrapers in Ooo still stand tall despite everything. In real life, tall buildings are vulnerable to earthquakes, war, and neglect. They require constant upkeep, constant repairs. Yet here, long after the Mushroom War, many of them remain upright. Some are tilted, some are hollowed out like carcasses, but their skeletons remain. This makes you wonder if there was something different about their construction. Did the humans of this pre-war age build with materials stronger than ours? Or is there some faint magical reinforcement seeping into the bones of these towers, keeping them upright even as everything else crumbles? It's not hard to imagine that some skyscrapers in Ooo were once filled with luxury. Perhaps the top floors were penthouses where the wealthiest humans lived in comfort overlooking the city below. They may have watched the first warning signs of the Mushroom War from glass windows high above the chaos, believing their wealth and status could protect them. But when the bomb fell, even the highest tower could not shield them. The air would have been filled with fire and toxic ash, sweeping through the city, no matter how high above it all you were. Those same luxury apartments now lie in ruins, perhaps home only to ghosts, their marble floors cracked, their chandeliers long gone, their walls covered with ivy and mold. And then, of course, there are the skyscrapers that seem to have been transformed entirely by magic. Some in Ooo are warped into strange shapes, their spires bending unnaturally, their windows glowing faintly with colors that seem almost alive. It raises the question of whether magic simply filled in the empty shell of the old world, twisting it into new forms. One tower might be home to a small pocket dimension, a space bigger on the inside than outside, created by accident when reality itself began to bend under the return of magic. Another might hum with strange vibrations, as though something still lives within its concrete heart, some remnant of human technology blending with arcane energy. If you pause for a moment and imagine walking across a collapsed floor of a skyscraper, you can picture how roots snake through the cracks, gripping the beams as if claiming the structure for nature. Perhaps a small stream runs down the side of the building, born from rainwater that collects at the roof. Birds perch along jagged ledges, building their nests where once there were offices. It's haunting, yes, but also oddly beautiful. The skyscrapers are not just ruins. They are reminders that life finds a way to move forward no matter what. And sometimes, Adventure Time characters stumble into these forgotten places. Finn and Jake have been seen wandering the skeletal frames of towers, exploring rooms that once had a purpose but now only echo with their footsteps. Their presence in these spaces feels almost like a ritual. The new world acknowledging the old, the young heroes walking through corridors that whisper of humanity's lost age. You can almost see Finn pausing in front of a broken window, gazing out at the horizon, perhaps wondering what it must have been like to live in these towers before the war. But if skyscrapers hold the echoes of humanity's past, they also hold shadows. Not all of these towers are safe. Some are haunted, not necessarily by literal ghosts, but by the atmosphere itself. Imagine standing in a high-rise as twilight falls, and the sun casts the broken windows into a fiery glow. The silence grows heavier. You start to hear creaks that could just be the building settling, or something moving within. You find graffiti scrawled in a language you don't recognize, left long after the war, but still old enough to flake away at your touch. These places are empty, but they don't feel abandoned. Something about them lingers, watching. And then, of course, there are the theories. Fans have speculated that some skyscrapers may hide secrets beneath them. Perhaps deep basements that served as bunkers, where humans tried to escape the war. Maybe whole underground cities lie beneath these towers, sealed away and waiting to be uncovered. The ruined tops of skyscrapers could just be markers, like gravestones, hinting at something larger below. If that's true, then Oo's skyscrapers aren't just ruins. They are entrances to mysteries we may never see. Some towers stand like solemn guardians, their shattered windows gazing endlessly into the distance. Others lean precariously, and their upper halves snapped and draped across nearby buildings like colossal fallen bridges. What is remarkable is how the world has begun to heal them. Vines creep upward, wrapping steel with living green. Moss softens stairwells and rooftops. Birds nest inside broken elevators, and bats roost behind crumbling panels. The very structures that once symbolized human ambition are now sanctuaries for creatures born in the New Age. It is as though nature, and perhaps even magic, has claimed ownership over these monuments of steel and glass. One cannot help but imagine what it might have felt like to live here in those final days before the Great Mushroom War. Perhaps families packed into high-rise apartments, watching the skies as strange weapons traced fire across the horizon. Perhaps executives sat in boardrooms, convinced their towers would outlast the chaos. But no human voice has echoed in these hallways for centuries. What remains is silence, broken only by the soft sigh of the wind passing through the broken windows. Some of these towers may not be as lifeless as they seem. There are rumors among the citizens of Ooo that powerful magical beings sometimes dwell in the tallest remains. In one story, an elemental spirit was said to curl itself within the top floors of a ruined skyscraper, feeding off lightning storms. In another, adventurers claim they found a floor transformed into an indoor jungle, complete with glowing plants and creatures that should not exist in such a confined space. Are these myths the product of Oo's wild imagination, or do the towers hold hidden worlds within themselves? Perhaps both are true, for in a land where magic pulses through every stone, the past is never entirely gone. It is also worth noting how time distorts perception. To us, skyscrapers feel eternal, but in truth they were fragile. Concrete cracks, steel rusts, and glass shatters easily. The fact that any still remain upright after centuries of neglect is remarkable. They are like bones of giants, standing defiantly against decay. One day, perhaps, even these last remnants will fall, leaving behind only rubble. But until then, their looming presence tells a story of a civilization that dared to reach higher than ever before, only to come crashing down in a single, catastrophic war. Some explorers whisper of treasures hidden within these towers, old safes with untouched valuables, archives filled with strange documents, laboratories where dangerous experiments once took place. Finn and Jake, in their wanderings, have come across some of these remnants. They once entered a tower that was filled with old mannequins, their faces faded but still staring into the void, arranged in unsettling positions, as though someone had been playing with them long after the humans were gone. A sense of unease lingers in places like that. It is as though the walls remember what happened and refuse to let go. And then there are the rooftops. Imagine standing atop one of these half-broken giants, looking out across Ooo. From up high, the Candy Kingdom might shimmer faintly in the distance, or the horizon might be filled with jagged mountains and forests that stretch forever. The air would be colder, thinner, and perhaps filled with the cries of unseen birds. Such a view reminds us that even in ruin there is beauty. The skyscrapers may no longer house bustling offices or shining apartments, but they remain as silent watchtowers connecting the old world to the new. If we look closely at the details, we begin to see how Oo's skyscrapers tell not just one story, but many. They are symbols of ambition, tragedy, resilience, and rebirth. They are haunted but not empty, broken but not forgotten. Each crack in the concrete, each vine curling through shattered glass, speaks of a world that once believed it could control everything, only to be humbled by forces greater than itself. And so when we drift through these towering ruins in our imagination tonight, we are not just walking through stone and steel. We are walking through echoes of hope and fear, success and downfall, endings and new beginnings. The skyscrapers of Ooo may be broken, but they endure as solemn monuments to both the power and the fragility of the human spirit. As the wind sighs through hollow halls and the stars reflect in the shattered glass, the towers continue to dream, not of bustling offices or crowded apartments, but of memories etched into their very bone. And in their silence, they invite us to listen, to pause, and to wonder about the world that came before and the one still rising around them. When we think of neighborhoods, we often picture tree-lined streets, neatly arranged houses, the laughter of children echoing from backyards, and the gentle glow of porch lights at night. But in the land of Ooo, those human neighborhoods exist only as hushed echoes of a time long gone. The Great Mushroom War wiped away so much, leaving behind scattered remnants of suburban dreams, yet those remnants were not lost forever. Nature, with its quiet patience and unyielding persistence, has reclaimed them in ways that are both haunting and beautiful. Walking through one of these overgrown neighborhoods feels like stepping into a dream where the past and present overlap. Houses lean at odd angles, their wooden beams sagging under the weight of creeping ivy. Driveways that once held cars are now broken paths where dandelions and moss burst through the cracks. Fences meant to divide yards have long since collapsed, swallowed by vines and wild trees. What was once a carefully ordered world of human design has now been woven into the fabric of Oo's wilderness. And yet, there is still something strangely familiar about these places. Even under centuries of overgrowth, you can tell they were once neighborhoods like our own. A rusted mailbox still stands at the edge of a yard. A cracked swing set sways softly into the breeze, though no children have played there for generations. The remnants of gardens, once tended with care, now bloom chaotically, their flowers stretching into the wild. These little signs remind us that people once lived here, that lives were built, stories written, and communities formed in these quiet streets. The most haunting beauty lies in how seamlessly nature has claimed ownership. Trees sprout directly through living room floors, their branches breaking out through shattered roofs. Entire houses become nests for birds and dens for foxes. Weeds blanket kitchen counters as though setting their own place at the table. Even cars left behind have been swallowed by vines, their frames becoming strange green sculptures in the middle of the street. The line between human creation and nature's reclamation has blurred until it is impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. Sometimes the neighborhoods are not entirely empty. The creatures of Ooo, both magical and mundane, have taken up residence. Tree folk find shelter in abandoned basements. Small candy people wander into these ruins, treating them as hidden playgrounds. Even Finn and Jake have stumbled into such places on their adventures, marveling at the strange beauty of the past intertwined with the present. These neighborhoods may have lost their original human inhabitants, but they are not dead. They are alive in new and unexpected ways. What makes these places even more fascinating is how time has painted them with layers of meaning. To a wanderer, a ruined neighborhood might feel like a place of quiet reflection. where one can pause and imagine the families who once lived there. To others, it might feel eerie, haunted by silence too heavy to ignore. For creatures born long after the Mushroom War, these neighborhoods are not ruins at all. They're simply part of the natural world, no different from forests or caves. Only we, looking back, can see the story they tell of what once was and what has become. Every detail whispers something if you're willing to listen. A child's toy, half buried in dirt, speaks of laughter long faded. A door still painted in cheerful colors, now chipped and weather-worn, hints at love and care from someone who once called this place home. And then, of course, there are the gardens. Even untended, plants flourish wildly here. Sometimes vegetables still sprout in the remnants of old plots, as if the earth remembers what was planted there centuries ago. Other times, flowers bloom in brilliant colors, reclaiming front yards and explosions of life that no human hand arranged. There is a strange comfort in this sight. Though human presence vanished, nature did not abandon these places. Instead, it embraced them, wove them into the living tapestry of Ooo. The neighborhoods did not truly disappear, they transformed. And in that transformation lies both a sense of loss and a promise of renewal. As you wander deeper into these reclaimed neighborhoods, you notice how silence is never truly silent. The absence of human voices has only made room for new sounds to take their place. Birds nest in the hollow beams of old houses, filling the air with gentle chirps at dawn. Crickets sing in the tall grass that has overtaken front lawns. Frogs croak from puddles forming in potholes on cracked streets. Nature has rewritten the soundtrack of these neighborhoods, replacing the hum of car engines and the chatter of neighbors with something slower, softer, and deeply alive. Sometimes, when you pause long enough, you can almost sense the rhythm of time itself in these places. There's a stillness, but it is not empty. It feels as if the land is breathing, patiently erasing the lines humans once drew and painting over them with its own brush. A lamppost leans under the weight of creeping vines, its light long gone. But the green life wrapped around it glows with vitality. The sidewalks, once paths for hurried footsteps, are now trails for wandering animals. What was designed for human convenience has been reshaped into something timeless, something that belongs not to people, but to the earth itself. In some neighborhoods, entire blocks have been swallowed by trees. From above, they look more like forests than suburbs, with only the faintest outlines of streets visible as faint scars on the ground. But if you look closely, you might still find a front porch hidden beneath the roots of an oak tree, or a chimney poking out from the leafy canopy like a forgotten monument. It's almost as if the houses and the trees are locked in an embrace, one falling, the other rising, together creating a new kind of architecture born of ruin and growth. One of the most striking things is the way water has reclaimed its place. Pipes burst long ago, and without upkeep, drainage systems collapsed. Now rainwater collects freely, creating ponds where backyards used to be. Ducks swim lazily where children once splashed in plastic pools. Streets become winding streams after a storm, carving their own new paths through the neighborhoods. And in the stillness of those waters, reflections shimmer broken rooftops, swaying grass, and the sky above, blending the remains of humanity with the endless cycle of nature. For the people of Ooo, these neighborhoods are not just curiosities. They are often seen as resources, places where adventurers might scavenge tools, relics, or even old books. Marceline the Vampire Queen, for example, has been shown haunting abandoned homes, finding little treasures that carry sentimental value from a world she remembers faintly. For her, these ruins are not abstract history. They are fragments of her own childhood. and that gives them a poignancy no one else can fully feel. Finn, too, has wandered through these spaces. For him, they are both fascinating and mysterious. He is one of the few humans left, yet he never truly lived in a neighborhood like this. His life was shaped by adventure and wild landscapes, not quiet streets and close-knit neighbors. Walking among the ruins, he might sense a longing for something he never had. The stability of family homes, the comfort of communities built on routine. In these ruins, Finn sees not only what was lost, but what might have been, had the war not torn the world apart. Other beings in Ooo have reshaped these neighborhoods for their own needs. Some candy people have been known to treat them as secret gardens, plucking wild fruits and flowers to bring back to the safety of the Candy Kingdom. Forest creatures burrow into collapsed garages, making them dens. Even magical beings like tree spirits and woodland sprites seem drawn to these overgrown suburbs, treating them almost like sacred spaces. The ruins serve not just as relics, but as sanctuaries, bridges between the human past and the wild present. There's also something deeply symbolic about the way these neighborhoods now exist. They remind us that nature is patient. No matter how strong human hands build, no matter how carefully communities are arranged, time and earth will always find their way back in. What was once claimed, organized, and shaped by humans has been reabsorbed into the greater whole. Yet it's not an act of destruction so much as one of renewal. These neighborhoods are not gone, they've simply changed their purpose. For dreamers, these places hold a quiet magic. Imagine walking down a street where every house is a garden, where every roof is a canopy of leaves, and every window frames a view of wildflowers. Imagine resting on a cracked front step as fireflies dance in the twilight, glowing softly in the thick summer air. These are not just ruins. They are fairy tales written in roots, branches, and stone. Some of the most haunting sights in these reclaimed neighborhoods are the playgrounds. The swings are rusted and half buried in soil, yet vines weave around their chains like delicate jewelry. The slides, once polished metal, are now softened by moss and tree roots pushing up from underneath. Jungle gyms stand like skeletons of a forgotten age wrapped in ivy, as though nature itself wanted to give children a new kind of playground, one built of living wood and green tendrils instead of steel and plastic. At sunset, these places are bathed in a golden light, and for a moment, they don't feel like ruins at all. They feel like nature's reinterpretation of joy, as though the earth remembers what laughter once filled these places and tries to honor it. Sometimes entire cul-de-sacs have been swallowed by fields of wildflowers. Yards that were once neatly fenced off are now open meadows where bees drift lazily from bloom to bloom. Colors ripple in the wind, purple, yellow, blue, and white stretching across what was once a grid of identical lawns. In spring, the air there is thick with the perfume of blossoms, and in winter, snow gathers gently over broken rooftops, softening the sharp edges of collapse. To step into such a place is to feel the world dreaming, as if the neighborhood has become a memory woven into the earth's own imagination. Finn and Jake have explored these wild suburbs in their adventures, and often, what strikes them is not danger, but quiet. For two heroes used to battling monsters or stumbling into chaos, the stillness of a neighborhood reclaimed by nature is something that lingers in their minds. Jake, with his playful spirit, sometimes sees the ruins as opportunities for games stretching across rooftops swallowed by ivy or rolling through grassy driveways. Finn, on the other hand, feels the melancholy more strongly. He wonders about the families that once lived here, about the humans whose lives unraveled long before he was born. For him, these ruins are pieces of a puzzle he can never fully solve. And yet, even in their silence, these neighborhoods carry stories. You might find a door frame still standing, with faded paint peeling from its surface, and carved into the wood a child's name or a set of initials. You might find a mailbox with letters still locked inside, their ink blurred by years of rain. You might even stumble upon forgotten belongings, a cracked pair of glasses, a worn-out shoe, or a photograph bleached by the sun until only shadows of faces remain. Each of these is a whisper from the past, a fragment of a world that once believed itself permanent. But the people of Ooo don't dwell on these neighborhoods with the same sadness we might feel. For them, the ruins are just another layer of their reality. To be in Mo, walking through them is like exploring an endless toy box full of mysterious objects and forgotten gadgets. To Marceline, they're bittersweet, stirring echoes of a life that slipped away long ago. To the animals and creatures who thrive there, they're simply home. Every inhabitant of Ooo experiences these spaces differently, and together, that tapestry of perspectives is what gives the ruins their strange, shifting aura. Interestingly, some neighborhoods have found a kind of second life through unusual magic. Enchanted plants sprout in rows where vegetable gardens used to be, but their fruits glow faintly at night, illuminating entire blocks with a gentle, otherworldly light. Spirits, too, are sometimes said to linger, not in a frightening way, but more like caretakers unwilling to leave. They are said to move objects softly, as though tidying up, or to stir a breeze that carries the scent of freshly baked bread where no oven remains. Whether these are ghosts or simply the imagination of adventurers, no one truly knows. But the effect is undeniable. These neighborhoods feel alive, even beyond the life of plants and animals. In some areas, the structures of the old homes have merged so completely with nature that they've created entirely new ecosystems. Trees growing up through living rooms stretch their branches through broken windows, making nests for owls and sparrows. Mushrooms cluster in damp basements, creating networks of hidden fungi beneath the ground. Bees build hives under the eaves of collapsed roofs, while deer wander calmly through what were once tidy suburban streets. The line between indoors and outdoors has dissolved entirely, leaving behind an otherworldly beauty. There are tales told among adventurers of wandering into these places at night and hearing faint echoes, not of animals or wind, but of laughter, clinking glasses, or the soft hum of televisions that no longer exist. Whether these are echoes imprinted by the Mushroom War's strange energies, or simply tricks of the mind inspired by nostalgia, they remain part of the legend of these ruins. The neighborhoods of Ooo are not only physical spaces, they are memory fields, places where the past and present touch lightly, never fully separating. These overgrown communities have also become symbols of resilience in their own way. They remind those who stumble upon them that even after collapse, the world keeps moving forward. Grass will grow through concrete, vines will climb walls, and life will persist in forms we might not expect. And perhaps that is the greatest story these neighborhoods tell. That endings are never truly endings, but transformations, turning what was once lost into something new. While many see these ruins as reminders of sorrow, others in Ooo have come to embrace them as sacred spaces. Some travelers say that walking through a street overtaken by flowers feels like stepping into a cathedral where nature itself is the architect. The canopy of trees replaces stained glass, shafts of sunlight stream through broken beams, and the silence carries a reverence that makes even the boldest wanderers speak in whispers. In this sense, the neighborhoods are not just ruins, but places of reflection. They invite those who pass through to pause, to remember that time moves on, and to consider what it means to live in a world built upon layers of the past. For characters like Princess Bubblegum, these ruins carry a more practical weight. She studies them like a scientist, tracing how human technology has decayed and how organic matter has taken over. To her, the neighborhoods are a laboratory of history, showing her both the fragility and the persistence of life. She sees opportunity in the way ecosystems adapt, often taking samples of vines that thrive in polluted soil or fungi that grow inside concrete. For her, every ruin is a classroom, and every street corner is a textbook written in nature's hand. But for others, the ruins serve more as mirrors of the heart. Marceline, wandering with her bass, sometimes sits on the cracked steps of a long-abandoned house. She plays songs into the air, and her notes drift across the skeletal frames of what used to be homes. Her music doesn't feel out of place there. It feels like an answer, a way of giving voice to what the walls themselves cannot say. In those quiet moments, it is as though the ruins themselves sigh in relief, happy to finally be heard. The ruins are not only for the melancholy, though. Some creatures thrive in them, creating small societies among the wild growth. Raccoon-like beings scavenge in overgrown kitchens, bats roost in attics, and enchanted plants spread across living rooms like rugs of green. In certain parts of Ooo, mutated animals have even repurposed neighborhoods into their own villages, building nests, dens, and burrows inside old homes. These creatures don't see the ruins as symbols of loss. To them, the neighborhoods are simply fertile ground, places where they can build futures unburdened by the past. Finn, too, has felt the power of these spaces in ways he doesn't always share aloud. To him, these neighborhoods are reminders that he is part of something bigger. He knows he is one of the last true humans in Ooo, and seeing the bones of old human life carved into the landscape fills him with a complicated kind of yearning. He wonders what it must have been like to ride bicycles down these cracked streets, to gather with family around a dinner table, to live in a house that wasn't threatened by magic or chaos. At the same time, he finds hope in the resilience of the world around him. Even if the humans lost what they built, life itself never gave up. That lesson becomes part of his journey, shaping the way he fights, not just to survive, but to protect what still grows in the wake of collapse. The neighborhoods also reveal something about Ooo itself, that the world is both fragile and eternal. Fragile because what humans built could so easily fall apart. Eternal because the earth reclaimed it all without hesitation. Every root, every flower, every blade of grass growing through shattered windows is proof that the world will never stop trying to heal itself. To walk among these places is to see that balance firsthand, the sorrow of endings and the beauty of beginnings woven into the same tapestry. In many ways, the neighborhoods reclaimed by nature are the most honest places in Ooo. They don't hide their scars, and they don't pretend to be something they're not. They are ruins, yes, but they are also gardens. They are graveyards, yes, but they are also nurseries of new life. They show us that the past does not vanish. It transforms. Every brick covered in moss is a reminder that nothing is ever truly gone. It simply changes shape. And perhaps that is why these neighborhoods continue to resonate so deeply, even though no one lives in them anymore. They are stories written in stone and vine, lessons taught by silence and soil. They tell us that even in ruin, beauty remains. They remind us that loss is not the end, but part of a cycle that keeps the world alive. And above all, they whisper gently to all who walk among them, "Remember, but do not despair. For just as the grass finds its way through the cracks, hope will always find its way through the ruins." So when night falls and the moonlight paints these neighborhoods silver, they no longer feel like empty shells of a forgotten time. They feel like sanctuaries, where nature holds memory in its arms and dreams patiently of what will come next. When the world ended, it did not simply stop. The fire of the Mushroom War consumed cities, poisoned the sky, and tore through the bones of the old earth. But in the silence that followed, life waited. Slowly, steadily, patiently, the world began to heal. And when it did, new people emerged, shaped not just by magic, but by resilience, by the echoes of what once was. These are the people who came after, and their stories are the true heartbeat of Ooo. What is striking about the world of Adventure Time is how rarely its inhabitants dwell on the ruins. Most of them are not historians or mourners. They are survivors, children of a world reborn. For them, the skyscrapers, swallowed by vines, and the broken machines buried in the soil are not tragic reminders. They are simply part of the landscape, as natural as mountains and rivers. To the people who came after, humanity's fall was not the end of everything. It was the soil from which their own existence grew. Take the Candy People, for example. Brought into being by Princess Bubblegum's experiments, they are cheerful, whimsical, and more fragile than any of the humans who came before them. Yet they have built a thriving kingdom out of sugar and sweetness, carving order out of chaos in their own unique way. To the Candy People, the ruins of old human civilization are background scenery, rarely questioned, rarely understood. Their lives are filled instead with festivals, treats, and the gentle rhythms of community. They are not weighed down by the tragedies of the past. Instead, they embody the lightness of a world that insists on joy, even after destruction. Then there are the Flame People, born of fire and fury, who carry with them the restless spirit of a land forever reshaped by war. They live in blazing cities where the air shimmers with heat, their society as volatile and passionate as the flames that birthed them. For them, the ruins of the old world hold little meaning. Why linger on the fragile structures of humanity, when their very existence is proof that something fiercer and more enduring has risen in its place? Their lives are not about looking back, but about burning bright in the now, unshaken by the shadows of history. And yet not all who came after see the ruins with such lightness. Some of the people of Ooo, particularly the hybrids and mutants born from radiation and magic, feel the weight of what came before. For them, the ruins are a mirror. They walk through cracked streets and wonder if the strange shapes of their own bodies are reflections of that same collapse, the war etched into their bones. These people live with a quiet awareness that they are both survivors and consequences, proof that history leaves its marks not only on stone, but on flesh. Still, whether born of candy, flame, slime, or shadow, the people of Ooo all share one common truth. They are children of resilience. Their lives are testaments to the way the world always continues, even after devastation. And in their laughter, their arguments, their love stories, and their mistakes, they show us that life after the end of the world is not only possible, it is vibrant, unpredictable, and full of wonder. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about the people who came after is how they live without the need to cling to the old world. Humans often measure themselves against their past, drawing identity from memory and history. But the new peoples of Ooo have no such burden. They are defined not by what came before, but by what they create in the present. A village built from candy bricks does not need to justify itself by the steel towers that once stood on the same land. A kingdom of fire has no obligation to echo the empires of humanity. Theirs is a freedom born of forgetting, and that freedom allows them to dream without limits. Yet in rare moments, there are whispers of curiosity. A candy person might stumble upon an old photo in the dirt and wonder about the strange flat faces smiling back at them. A flame child might wander through a crumbling mall and marvel at the odd structures of glass and steel, not knowing that they once held shops and lives. These are fleeting sparks of wonder, quickly consumed by the pull of their own present lives. But they remind us that even in forgetting, the past is never completely erased. It lingers quietly, waiting for someone to notice. And in this way, the people who came after do not live in the shadow of the old world. They live in its sunlight, transformed into something unrecognizable, something new. They are not the continuation of humanity. They are its legacy, woven into the fabric of Ooo in forms that are stranger and brighter than anyone could have predicted. Among the many new peoples of Ooo, some walk a line between remembrance and reinvention. The hybrids, for instance, are a curious mix of what once was and what the world became. Creatures with human-like qualities, hands, faces, voices, yet carrying traits of beasts, plants, or stranger things. They suggest that even though humanity fell, it did not vanish completely. Fragments of the old genetic tapestry lingered, reshaped by magic and mutation until something entirely new was born. These hybrids are scattered across the land, living quiet lives in small villages or roaming as wanderers. Some carry with them an instinctual yearning for belonging, as if some echo of their human ancestry compels them to search for a home they never truly knew. And in that yearning, one can see the faintest connection to the past, a longing to rebuild, to create community, to hold on to something steady in a world that has so often crumbled. But not all of the people who came after dwell on such questions. Many simply thrive in the peculiar beauty of Ooo. The Slime Kingdom, for example, is a society that seems to defy traditional ideas of permanence. Made up of shifting, gelatinous beings, its people can reform after being split apart, their bodies adapting in ways that make old human ideas of mortality seem distant and irrelevant. For them, identity is fluid, both literally and culturally. What does it mean to worry about the past when your very self is always changing, reshaping, and beginning again? Their lives are not bound to memory. Instead, they embody a philosophy of constant renewal, a way of existing that humanity itself never mastered. The same can be said of the cloud people, drifting in their airy homes above the land. They embody freedom and lightness, unburdened by the gravity that ties most beings to the earth. Their laughter drifts through the skies, echoing across valleys, as if the weight of history never touched them. To the cloud people, the world is not a place of ruins and recovery. It is simply a vast playground where the wind itself carries stories and songs. Yet scattered among these joyous societies are smaller groups who feel differently. There are those who look at the relics of humanity with reverence, even longing. Small cults and communities sometimes form around scraps of the old world, like a tattered book, a surviving statue, or even a half-functioning machine. These people believe the past holds secrets worth remembering, perhaps even worth restoring. They are the dreamers who think humanity might one day rise again, or that the wisdom of the old world still has something to offer. Often their numbers are small and their efforts misguided. But their existence speaks to the way memory always clings to life, no matter how far it drifts. It is worth noting how the magical beings of Ooo fit into this story as well. Wizards, for instance, often carry with them more direct knowledge of what came before. Some are ancient, stretching back to the days not long after the war. Others are scavengers of history, gathering relics and twisting them into new spells. To them, the people who came after are both students and raw material fresh clay for their enchantments. Wizards occupy a curious place in the post-war tapestry. Half preservers, half distorters, they keep fragments of the old world alive, but rarely in their original form. And then there are beings like the vampires. Marceline herself is perhaps the most famous example, a child of both human and demon blood who lived through the war and the centuries after it. Unlike the candy folk or the slime people, she carries memory within her, a first-hand witness to the fall of humanity and the slow rise of Oo's new inhabitants. Her very existence bridges the gap between what was and what came after. For her, the world is not a playground of new beginnings. It is a storybook filled with pages she remembers turning. And yet even she finds joy, companionship, and music in this strange new land, proof that memory and renewal can coexist. The people who came after are not united by one story. They are 1,000 threads woven into a tapestry of life that stretches across deserts, forests, oceans, and skies. Some are joyous, some somber, some forget, while others cling to memory. But all of them, in their own way, are proof that the end was not truly the end. The war destroyed one world, but it left room for countless others to bloom. Among all the new peoples of Ooo, there was one group who carried the heaviest weight of all the humans who somehow survived. They were not many, scattered in tiny communities hidden far from the chaos of the new world, but their very existence stood as a reminder that the line of humanity had not been entirely erased. These survivors, however, were not the humans of old. The Mushroom War had burned away much of their confidence, their sense of progress, their belief that technology could always solve their problems. What remained were cautious people, often mistrustful of magic, fearful of the strange creatures who now roamed the land, and unsure of their own place in the new order. One such community was the settlement of Founders Island, far across the ocean, where generations of humans lived in relative isolation. Protected by sea and by their own rigid traditions, they preserved scraps of technology and order. Yet even there, humanity was no longer the ambitious civilization it once was. They clung to old ways, not out of innovation, but out of survival, creating rules and boundaries that often stifled more than they inspired. These humans were a people in hiding, keeping themselves apart from the magic of Ooo as if fearful it might infect them, change them, or prove how irrelevant they had become. On the mainland, other small groups existed, often descended from war survivors who had taken shelter in bunkers, caves, or remote landscapes. These humans were rougher, less sheltered, and more open to change. Some lived alongside hybrids and magical creatures, adapting slowly to a world they could never fully control. They still bore the old instincts of humanity, craftsmanship, storytelling, a love for community, but their culture was reshaped by necessity. They wore scavenged armor pieced together from rusting machines. They hunted and foraged in lands overrun with talking animals and candy people. They knew the world was no longer theirs, and though that knowledge was bitter, it also freed them from the arrogance that had once led humanity to war. For the people of Ooo, humans became almost mythical. Many had never seen one, and those who did often regarded them with fascination. To meet a human was to glimpse something old and rare, like finding a fossil that still walked and breathed. Finn the human, of course, stands as the most iconic example. Raised not by his kind, but by magical creatures, he embodied both the legacy of the old world and the spirit of the new. Finn's bravery, compassion, and curiosity made him a bridge between people's proof that humanity still had something to give, even in a world where it was no longer dominant. The rarity of humans meant that other peoples of Ooo often filled the roles humanity once played. The Candy Kingdom, under Princess Bubblegum's watchful guidance, became a center of culture and governance. Slime and Fire Kingdoms had their own identities and systems. Wolves spoke, trees whispered, and even rivers sometimes sang. In such a world, humans were not leaders but participants, joining a chorus much larger than themselves. And perhaps that was the lesson the Mushroom War left behind, that no single people should claim dominion over the earth, for life itself is vast, diverse, and too unpredictable to be contained by one species' ambitions. Still, the memory of humanity lingered in quiet ways, in the broken buildings reclaimed by vines, in the rusting cars swallowed by moss, in the faded signs pointing to nowhere. New peoples might ignore these relics, but to humans, they were fragments of a story that could not be fully forgotten. A cracked computer, a melted toy, a shattered piece of glass, all became reminders of who they had been and what they had lost. For the descendants of survivors, these objects were both comforting and haunting, like whispers from ancestors they could barely understand. And yet, despite all the loss, humans still created. They still laughed, sang, and told stories. Around fires in hidden valleys or aboard wandering ships, they spun tales of the old world and imagined what the future might hold. Some dreamed of reclaiming what was lost, while others found joy in embracing the strangeness of Ooo. In their small, flickering communities, they became a people of resilience rather than dominance, and perhaps, in their humility, they found a kind of wisdom that had eluded the old world. The people who came after, whether human, hybrid, or wholly magical, lived in a delicate balance. Each carried a piece of the great story that began with fire and ruin but blossomed into something extraordinary. In their differences, they created harmony. In their survival, they created hope. And in their acceptance of the world as it was, rather than as it once had been, they ensured that life continued not just to endure, but to flourish. As centuries quietly passed, the people of Ooo wove their identities into a vibrant mosaic. What had once been fragments of survival slowly transformed into full cultures, each with its own traditions, myths, and rhythms of daily life. What began as scattered individuals making do in the shadow of ruins blossomed into communities that thrived not in spite of the strange magic that filled the land, but because of it. Take the Candy Kingdom, for example. At first glance, it may have seemed whimsical, even fragile. Yet the Candy People were resilient in their own way. Under Princess Bubblegum's guidance, they became one of the most structured societies in Ooo. They farmed sugar fields, constructed glowing candy buildings, and crafted rituals around joy and celebration. Though they were often innocent to the point of naivety, their optimism was contagious. They made festivals out of even the simplest events, ensuring that laughter and music were always within reach. Where humans might have mourned the loss of the old world, the Candy People turned life into a party, reminding everyone that survival was not just about endurance, but about joy. Then there were the Flame People. Born from fire, living in a kingdom of eternal heat, they carried forward the destructive force that once ended the old world, but transformed it into a way of being. Fire was not merely a weapon to them. It was identity, energy, and life itself. Their society was forged in strength and resilience, demanding courage from each of its members. Their traditions revolved around the cycles of flame burning, extinguishing, rekindling, an echo of destruction and renewal that mirrored the fate of the earth itself. While outsiders often feared their power, the flame people's existence spoke to a truth about Ooo, that even destruction could give rise to community and meaning. The Slime Kingdom represented another transformation, embodying adaptability above all. Its people shifted forms, their identities fluid, their rules just as malleable. To them, structure was less important than flow, and so their culture embraced flexibility. They lived without the rigid hierarchies of others, thriving instead on play, experimentation, and constant change. While their lack of order baffled some, their very fluidity ensured they could survive anything. In a world rebuilt from ruin, such adaptability was perhaps the greatest strength of all. Beyond the great kingdoms, smaller peoples flourished. The hot dog knights roamed the land with earnest bravery. The bear people built communities in the woods. Even the smallest of talking animals carved out niches for themselves, each contributing to the vast ecosystem of Ooo. What united them all was not sameness, but difference. Each people carried a perspective, a way of living that enriched the greater whole. And within all these cultures, there remained the lingering influence of humans, not through dominance as before, but through connection. Finn, though only one boy, embodied the bridge between worlds. Through his friendships with candy people, flame royalty, magical creatures, and even entities far stranger, he proved that humanity still had a role, not as rulers, but as companions. His adventures demonstrated that bonds of trust and kindness could cross every boundary, even those of species, magic, or kingdom. This shift in perspective away from control and toward coexistence was the true legacy of those who came after. Where the old world had sought to dominate nature and one another, the new world found strength in diversity. It was messy, sometimes chaotic, but it was alive in a way the old world had forgotten how to be. Life in Ooo was unpredictable, but in that unpredictability there was a kind of beauty, a reminder that existence itself is a gift that can take many shapes. Generations into the future, stories of the Mushroom War faded into myth. To the children of Ooo, the rusted skeletons of skyscrapers were simply mysterious mountains, their glass eyes long since shattered. The twisted metal scattered across the plains became playgrounds for adventure, not reminders of destruction. The memory of the old world transformed from sorrow into legend, a distant past whose lessons were carried forward not by textbooks, but by the living proof of those who survived. The people who came after in all their forms carried the torch of life through the darkness left by war. They sang songs, built homes, laughed at silly jokes, and cried over losses. They created families, not always of blood, but often of choice. They discovered that survival was never about who was strongest or most advanced, but about who could embrace change with an open heart. In their resilience, they ensured that Ooo would never again be a barren wasteland. Instead, it would remain forever strange, forever magical, and forever alive. And so when we look at the world of Ooo, we see not just the shadow of what was lost, but the brilliance of what was found. These peoples, born from fire, magic, and survival, remind us that even in the face of great endings, life has a way of beginning again. The people who came after were not defined by the ruins beneath their feet, but by the new worlds they built upon them. In their laughter, their courage, and their creativity. The legacy of the Mushroom War was transformed not into despair, but into hope. When we imagine the land of Ooo, it's easy to picture rolling fields, colorful kingdoms, and lone adventurers wandering through forests. Yet scattered across its landscape are places that do not quite fit into the natural flow of things. They stand apart, humming with forces that bend the rules of time, space, and reality itself. These are not just cities of stone and mortar, but living echoes of forgotten eras, gateways where ancient technology and raw magic meet. The world after the Mushroom War was not built on clean foundations. Instead, civilizations sprouted up on top of ruins, salvaging what they could while unknowingly stepping into streams of power that flowed beyond their understanding. Some of these settlements grew into cities unlike any other cities that seemed to exist both in the present moment and outside of it. They were places where the ticking of clocks and the whispers of enchantments overlapped, where history itself seemed to fold in on itself. Take the Crystal Citadel, for instance. Far above Ooo, suspended in the shimmering void of space, the Citadel was less a city and more a prison. Yet in its structure, we find the strange merging of design that feels both ancient and futuristic. Built to hold the multiverse's most dangerous criminals, its crystalline walls stretched into infinity, reflecting back not just light, but possibility itself. Walking through it felt like stepping into a paradox. One could sense both the rigid discipline of cosmic order and the chaotic shimmer of magic woven into its very walls. Though not a city in the traditional sense, the Citadel mirrored one. It had architecture, inhabitants, and a rhythm of existence that pulsed in harmony with both time and magic. Closer to Ooo itself stood ruins like the City of Thieves, a place that thrived on vice and survival. On the surface, it seemed simple, an ordinary settlement, where one could lose their gold and dignity in the same breath. But when you look closer, you realized that the city itself seemed caught in a cycle, like a loop of temptation and consequence. No matter how many thieves were unmasked or punished, new ones seemed to appear, as though the city was not just a place, but a curse. The air shimmered with an energy that felt timeless, a binding enchantment ensuring that the nature of the city never changed. In its dusty streets, one could almost hear time folding over itself, repeating the same patterns endlessly. Then there was Wizard City, a place unlike any other in Ooo. A hub of knowledge, chaos, and rivalry, its streets buzzed with magical energy. Here, time was not measured by hours or days, but by spells cast, potions brewed, and duels fought. The very air shimmered with enchantments, making every step through the cobblestone streets feel like wading through invisible currents. Wizard City was alive with contradictions. Its inhabitants sought order through rules of magical conduct, while simultaneously breaking them at every chance for power or glory. At night, when lanterns glowed with flames of every imaginable color, the city felt like it existed in a dream, a place where reality thinned just enough for the impossible to walk openly. What made these cities fascinating was not just their unique character, but their placement within Oo's history. They existed at crossroads where remnants of the old world collided with the blooming of new magic. The Citadel carried the echoes of cosmic justice, its builders long forgotten, yet its purpose eternal. The City of Thieves reflected the flaws of human ambition, cursed perhaps by choices made in ages past. And Wizard City stood as proof that the arcane had not only returned after the war, but made itself at home in civilization, weaving magic into the very definition of progress. Every city in Ooo seemed to carry a story that stretched beyond its walls, one that touched both the flow of time and the mysteries of magic. They were not static places. They shifted, adapted, sometimes even rebelled against the forces that created them. To walk through them was to walk through layers of history, where the footsteps of the present overlapped with shadows of the past and whispers of the future. And while many of Oo's inhabitants went about their days unaware of these deeper truths, adventurers like Finn and Jake often found themselves stumbling into the heart of these mysteries. To them, a city might first appear as a simple backdrop to a quest, but before long, its hidden nature would reveal itself. If you trace the hidden threads that connect these unusual places, you begin to notice a pattern. None of them stand alone. They are like beads strung along the necklace of Oo's long history, each shining with its own light, yet bound to the others through forces invisible to the ordinary eye. Take the ruins of old human cities buried beneath layers of earth and magic. Though most of them lie silent, fragments sometimes rise again, touched by sorcery or by the restless weight of time itself. There are stories of underground halls where technology still flickers to life, machines whirring with no hands to guide them. Some travelers whisper of staircases that loop back upon themselves, leading wanderers into days that feel eerily out of sync with the present. These ruins are cities between time and magic too, not because they thrive like Wizard City, but because they linger in defiance of being forgotten. They remind us that even destruction does not erase memory, it only buries it for a while. The Nightosphere adds another layer to this strange puzzle. Hunson Abadir's domain might not fit the definition of a city in Ooo, but within its infinite expanse lie clusters of bizarre structures that resemble towns or districts. They do not follow the natural laws of construction or time. Towers twist at impossible angles, bridges stretch into voids, and doorways lead not to rooms but to entire eras of suffering. To the unlucky traveler, stepping into these nightmarish districts feels like entering a dream where past, present, and future collapse into a single moment of dread. And yet, they are lived-in creatures of the Nightosphere carve out their existence there, thriving in chaos as naturally as humans once thrived in cities of stone. And then, further along the strange map of Ooo, lies the Glass Kingdom. Though more fragile than most, its walls and towers gleam with a beauty that feels pulled from another age. The citizens live among reflections, their very world built from the delicate shimmer of glass. In the right light, the entire kingdom looks like an echo, as though it belongs to a slightly different layer of reality. When cracks spread across its towers, they appear like lines of time itself trying to fracture the kingdom apart. But glass, though delicate, also has resilience. The Glass Kingdom endures, balancing on the edge of fragility and strength, embodying the way Ooo itself survives between collapse and rebirth. One cannot ignore the Candy Kingdom either, though it seems cheerful and ordinary compared to the strangeness of other places. Beneath its sugary surface lies the unmistakable hand of time and magic intertwined. Built from the imagination of Princess Bubblegum, the kingdom is both a city of science and one of enchantment. Gum, candy, and chocolate are not natural building materials, yet somehow they hold against weather, age, and war. The kingdom is alive in more ways than one. Every wall and tower is also a being, watching, listening, remembering. When you walk through its candy-coated streets, you are not just moving through a city. You are walking inside a living memory shaped by its ruler's genius. Here, too, time and magic blur. for what other city could be rebuilt again and again, no matter the destruction it faced. Across all these examples, what becomes clear is that cities in Ooo are not just centers of population. They are artifacts, reflections, and sometimes even living beings. They are spaces where the rules of reality have been rewritten. Some emerge from deliberate creation, others from accidents of history, and still others from the hands of beings whose power transcended ordinary comprehension. Yet all of them teach us something important. That in Ooo, survival was not simply about continuing life, but about weaving together the broken threads of time with the raw essence of magic. When Finn, Jake, or Marceline wandered through these places, they often brushed against mysteries far older than themselves. A casual stroll through Wizard City might reveal a spell book holding secrets of the world's first wizards. A simple adventure into the Glass Kingdom might stir echoes of its fragile past. Even a run through the City of Thieves might trigger the sense that destiny itself was looping in circles. These cities were teachers, though their lessons came quietly, disguised as trials, temptations, or wonders. And perhaps that is why they still capture our imagination. Cities between time and magic are not just settings, they are characters, breathing, shifting, whispering their stories into the ears of those who listen closely. Among the most intriguing of these places is the City of Thieves. At first glance, it seems almost mundane compared to glittering glass towers or spell-forged citadels. Yet its strangeness is subtler. In this city, theft is not only tolerated but woven to the very rules of existence. No matter how hard a person tries to resist, sooner or later they steal something or something of theirs is stolen. It is less a law of man than a law of nature within the city's walls, like gravity or time itself. What does that say about its origin? Some claim the city was cursed by an ancient thief king, condemned forever to be trapped in cycles of dishonesty. Others wonder if it was built upon a fractured knot of time where morality split in two. Whatever its cause, the City of Thieves is a place where magic, time, and human weakness converge, creating a city that reveals as much about the human spirit as it does about supernatural forces. Contrast that with Wizard City, whose spires glitter like a constellation on the horizon. Here, magic is not merely background noise, it is infrastructure. Spells hold up buildings, run water systems, and power lights. Even the air seems charged, humming softly with invisible energy. To walk down its streets is to stroll through centuries of accumulated knowledge. Young apprentices rub shoulders with ancient masters, each practicing arts that bend the rules of reality. Time moves oddly here, too. Wizards who live centuries might casually sip tea with students who will only live a fraction of that. Conversations between generations overlap in strange ways, making Wizard City feel both eternal and fleeting at once. It is not a city that sits within time, it floats above it, suspended by the very forces it was built to study. Another city draped in mystery is the Fire Kingdom. Though not often framed as a city of time, it carries that quality in its own fierce way. The Fire Kingdom's walls pulse with heat, and its architecture burns with a glow that feels timeless, as though flames themselves etched its form into the stone. Fire is both destructive and eternal, and so is this kingdom. It renews itself endlessly, ashes giving rise to flames, flames turning again to ashes. Its citizens embody this paradox, living in a place where a spark can end a life, but also where warmth sustains. This eternal cycle reflects time in its rawest form, endless repetition, creation through destruction. And of course, Magic fuels every heartbeat of this fiery civilization, proving once again how inseparable the two forces are. Beyond these kingdoms and ruins, there are places more hidden, more elusive. Some whisper of the crystal dimension, where entire cities exist in glittering stillness. To an outsider, these cities might appear frozen in time, their crystalline streets and towers unchanging across millennia. But to those who live within them, time flows differently, slower, softer, as though days preferred to linger before moving on. The effect is so strong that travelers who spend too long inside risk returning to Ooo and finding decades have passed. These crystal-bound cities blur the line between dimension and dream, their existence proving that time itself can be sculpted by the medium it passes through. Even more mysterious is the notion of cities that exist only as echoes. Some adventurers claim they have stumbled across places that seem real for only a few hours, streets bustling with people, voices chattering, life pulsing through every window, and then in the blink of an eye, everything vanishes. The city becomes a ruin again, or perhaps simply an empty field. These echoes may be remnants of the pre-war world, fragments caught in loops of time. Or they may be projections of magic, strong enough to cast memories into physical form. Whatever they are, they remind us that not every city between time and magic is permanent. Some exist only as ghosts, flickering briefly before dissolving into the fabric of Ooo. And then there is the strangest city of all, the one that might not even exist in any traditional sense. Some theorists call it the heart of Ooo, a hidden metropolis where time and magic fully overlap, where every moment of history and every spell ever cast gather together. To find it would mean to step into the very core of Oo's existence. No hero has ever claimed to see it, and perhaps it is only a legend. But in a world where so many impossible cities do exist, perhaps this final, all-encompassing city waits to be discovered, nestled between seconds and hidden in the cracks of spells. What unites all these places, whether they are real, legendary, or half-forgotten, is the sense that Ooo itself is not merely a land scattered with towns and villages. It is a living story written into geography. Each city is a chapter, and each one bends time and magic to express a different theme. Temptation, the city of thieves; knowledge in Wizard City; resilience in the Glass Kingdom; rebirth in the Fire Kingdom. Together they form a map not just of the land, but of the human journey through despair, hope, and wonder. When we reflect on these cities, something becomes clear. They are not random accidents scattered across Ooo. Each of them embodies a particular truth about the relationship between time, magic, and the people who live in their shadow. They are like mirrors reflecting the ways that beings attempt to adapt, survive, and even thrive when caught between forces that they cannot fully control. Take the Candy Kingdom, for example. At first it seems whimsical, colorful, even fragile. Yet beneath the gumdrop towers and frosting-coated walls lies an impressive structure of order. Princess Bubblegum designed the kingdom as both a scientific project and a safe haven, mixing her mastery of biology and chemistry with her political vision. In many ways, it is a city built on controlled magic science bent to feel like enchantment. And it is a city constantly working against time, preserving the lives of candy citizens whose bodies should crumble long before they do. By binding time and magic together so carefully, the Candy Kingdom becomes a symbol of how rationality and imagination can coexist. In contrast, the Nightosphere is less a city and more a sprawling abyssal metropolis. Its architecture shifts constantly, responding to the will of its overlord Hunson Abadir. Towers twist and crumble only to reassemble elsewhere. Streets lead nowhere or fold back upon themselves, mocking the concept of linear time. Here, magic is pure chaos, untempered and cruel. Time bends like smoke in the wind, meaning no one who enters can be sure how much of their life they will lose inside. Yet for all its horror, the nightosphere is undeniably alive, pulsing with energy and the essence of those trapped within. It is proof that even in darkness, time and magic can fuse into something awe-inspiring. Then there are the hidden underground places, such as the remains of subway systems and abandoned bunkers. Some of these ruins hum with radiation, remnants of the Great Mushroom War, while others seem frozen mid-function, as though the clocks inside simply decided to stop. In certain tunnels, explorers whisper of flickering lights and voices that sound like they come from another era. Could these be glitches in time, the lingering echoes of a world that once was? Or are they the residue of magical experiments gone wrong, bleeding across centuries into our present? These lost cities underground may not sparkle like Wizard City or blaze like the Fire Kingdom, but they are no less tied to the delicate interplay of time and magic. What fascinates most about these cities is how they challenge our sense of permanence. In the real world, cities rise and fall, but they do so within the slow framework of history. In Ooo, however, the rise and fall of cities can happen in the blink of an eye or stretch across eternities. A wizard's spell might suspend a city in stasis for centuries. A time anomaly could loop a single day forever, trapping its inhabitants in a cycle they cannot break. Or perhaps a catastrophe could burn a kingdom down overnight, only for magic to rebuild it in a form unrecognizable by dawn. In this way, cities become almost like living characters themselves, caught in the same struggles as the people who inhabit them. Imagine wandering through these places at night, the quiet streets of Wizard City glowing faintly from wards etched into the stones, the endless heat of the Fire Kingdom casting dancing shadows on the walls, the hushed halls of a glass city where the air itself seems fragile. Each step through these cities would be a step not only across space, but across time itself. You would feel the pulse of centuries, the residue of spells, the grief of ruins, and the hope of rebuilding all overlapping at once. To dream of these cities is to feel the weight of history and the lightness of magic interwoven. And yet, for all their strangeness, the cities between time and magic also remind us of something comforting. They remind us that even in a world so unstable, so fractured by war and wild magic, people continue to gather, to build, to create homes. Whether they are candy people or wizards, fire elementals or thieves, the instinct to build cities is universal. To gather under shared roofs is to defy the chaos of time, to tame the unpredictability of magic, and to carve out a place where one can belong. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these cities teach us, that even when magic warps reality and time twists itself into knots, life endures. It finds cracks to grow in, weaving new stories among the ruins of the old. Cities, in this sense, are more than structures. They are the collective dreams of those who dared to plant themselves in uncertain soil. They are proof that no matter how unstable time may be, no matter how wild magic grows, there will always be a desire to create something lasting, even if lasting in Ooo means something very different from what we expect. And so as we close this exploration of the cities between time and magic, picture them not as distant curiosities, but as living echoes of Oo's heart. They are the crossroads of the past, present, and future. They are the weaving of spell and stone, of memory and dream. They are places that hold within them all the contradictions of life itself, chaos and order, decay and rebirth, fear and hope. To walk through their streets, whether in waking life or in the quiet of imagination, is to understand that time and magic are not simply forces outside of us. They shape us, but we also shape them every time we choose to build, to hope, to create. In that sense, every city in Ooo is not just a place on a map, but a reflection of what it means to live in a world forever suspended between eternity and enchantment. And so our journey through the hidden cities of Ooo comes to a close. We've wandered streets built of candy, fire, glass, and even whispers of forgotten time. Each place has reminded us that in a world shaped by chaos and wonder, life still finds ways to grow, to build, and to dream. As you rest tonight, carry with you the quiet thought that even in uncertainty, beauty always endures. May the echoes of these stories guide you gently into sleep, where your own dreams can become their own kind of city, woven from time, magic, and imagination. Thank you for joining me, sleepyheads. Until next time, rest well and dream deep.